After configuring proper contact information and schedules for our users, we also need to set up on-call rosters to be able to use alarm notifications properly. An on-call roster is a list of users that are going to be notified when an alarm happens. To set up an on-call roster, we need to go to the Configure section of the Gateway webpage and go to the On-Call Rosters link in the Alarming section. Here we can click on the Create New On-Call Roster link to create an on-call roster. I'm going to call mine Operators, and then click the Create New On-Call Roster button at the bottom of the page. You'll notice I've created an on-call roster, but it doesn't have any users in it. This is because I haven't added any. To add users to my on-call roster, I simply need to go over to the More button on the right and click the Manage link. Here I can move users into and out of my on-call roster. First, on this drop-down menu here, I need to select a user source. I'm going to look at the default user source. We then see a list of users in that user source. You'll notice that some of the users have small icons next to the names. This is to indicate that this user has that type of contact information. My users admin and guest don't have any of those icons, so they shouldn't be added to my on-call roster until they have proper contact information. To add a user to my on-call roster, I simply need to click the arrow to the right of the user's name. Since this is my operators on-call roster, I'm going to add George and Joe, since they're my two operators. Once they're in the on-call roster, I can then move them up or down in the list. The order is important because this is the order that those users are going to be notified in, from the top down to the bottom. Once I have my roster configured properly, I can then hit the Save button at the bottom. You'll notice that my operators roster now has 2 users in it. Let's create a second on-call roster, and this time I'm going to call this one All. I'm going to click the button to create a new on-call roster. You'll notice that it's created my roster with 0 users. I'm going to go ahead and click the More button and go to Manage. Again, I'm going to select my default user source. But this time, because it's a roster called All, I'm going to add all of my users with contact information to it. The order doesn't matter to me, so I'm just going to click the Save button at the bottom. You can see I now have one on-call roster with 4 users and another on-call roster with 2. In addition, you may have noticed that both of my on-call rosters have both George and Joe in them. This is okay because users can belong to multiple rosters. With these rosters and a notification profile, we can then set up an alarm pipeline that'll send out alarms. We'll go over alarm pipelines in the next section of videos.